Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Mann, and I'm here with Nicole Hendricks. We are both from the BRIC Foundation. Excited to be here. So, like I said, my name is Allison Mann. I'm a co-founder and CEO of the BRIC Foundation. That is my one of my many hats that I wear that I'm super passionate about. On top of that, I'm also currently talent manager and co-president of Fourth Wall Animation at Fourth Wall Management. In my role, I manage talent and strategize development of projects, whether it's feature, international, TV, and then I collaborate with everybody and everyone in the industry on, again, whether it's international or domestic. For my background, I've always wanted to be in animation. I've always loved this industry. I wanted to be an artist and then fell onto the business side. And the journey of BRIC started about 4 years ago. I had been in the recruiting side within animation. That's where I got my start. So I've been in the industry for about 20 years, and for about 17, I was on talent recruitment, and I've recruited for studios like Nickelodeon and Disney and Paramount and you name it, I've probably been there. I also did a stint in tech and gaming and absolutely loved all my time. And then I flipped to development and now again on the management side. But it's always been an interesting journey when we talk about diversity and inclusion and what does our career pathways look like into our industry. And so oftentimes when I would put together a list of candidates for my hiring managers, they would innately always say, this is a great list of candidates, but where's the diversity? And so I agree. I was like, where is the diversity? And where are people? Like, why? And it's great that we have the same people applying all the time. We have a great industry and makeup already, but where is the breakdown to our industry, which is a privileged industry? And how do we get more people wanting to join us in our workforce, whether it is on the creative positions or overhead? And so BRIC was founded, and BRIC stands for Break, Reinvent, Impact, and Change. And we're about how do we create access points for women and underrepresented groups that want to excel in creative leadership. Um, how do we create access points? How do we look at the career pathways and where the disconnect is from early education all the way through higher education to really repair and build so that people know that they have an opportunity to really come into our industry and not just to work, but to make money and to have a living. So we're here to kind of myth bust and create those opportunities and access. And today's conversation will do a deep dive into the challenges we're facing currently in the industry and why it's taken us so long to get where we're at, knowing that we are all like everybody has great intentions, all the studios, everybody wants to see increase in representation. And so how do we work together collectively to solve these challenges? So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the stats of where we're currently at and where we can make improvements. So I'm going to kick it off to Nicole to tell you all a little bit about herself and why BRIC was important for her as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Al. And Peter, can we go ahead and share screen? And so I am a producer. Producers are, the people that really organize and help creatives do their vision. Obviously, there are creative producers, and in certain contexts, I am that. I came up through live action and advertising and gaming, and then I'm now currently in animation and more on the art side of things. It's very important to us that BRIC always be grounded in industry so we're able to leverage our working everyday connections for the populations that we're serving and trying to gain access into the industry. I am also the co-founder of the Conspire Association, which is an advocacy organization for artists and their role within the entertainment industry. We put on a red carpet show every year. Wacom has been a wonderful partner in the past and currently. And then I'm also the executive producer for 9B Collective, which is the first Black-owned concept art studio. And I believe Mikey Wandy and Christina Pham are going to be on right after us. So very exciting. And so I just wanted to take you through obviously who we are. We just talked about that. And why it was important to me is I was working in gaming when Allison came to me to start BRIC, and I was the only female director at a global gaming company. And there were a lot of things that I was just like, if we just had a couple more women at the table, like the perspective would change. And so that was kind of the mindset that I was in when we wanted to start this organization and try to obviously get more women into leadership roles in general across all aspects, but also, again, fixing these pipeline issues that we're going to be talking about throughout this presentation. We just said our story. But why? Is this so important? And there's a lot of challenges. I'm sure Stacy Smith, Dr. Smith, would not appreciate that I put her photo under "Things Are Broken," but I do like to cite a lot of her research because the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, along with UCLA, is also doing just really groundbreaking work in tracking where we are and where and how we can get to a better place. And so, just like our BRIC Summit, which is our yearly kind of workshop session, we always like to start our day in research and in facts and grounding them in reality. So we're going to go through some of that with you. There are some tiny URL links to the actual research as well. So this is just something that I don't think people think about really. But in terms of how many women speak in films, there's only 34% in 2019. And this data is from 2019, but a lot of that has kind of frozen with COVID. So I don't consider these to be significantly outdated numbers at all. And then with that, only 43%, 39 films were depicted as a female lead or co-lead. And then only 17 female actors were from underrepresented groups. And then again, another thing we talk about is the age of 45 or older. The next one, because obviously ageism is another thing as well. We are at an all-time high for underrepresented characters at the center of storytelling. We had 32 in 2019 and 17 women. And so overall, that's 17%, which isn't amazing at all. I do think that we're going to see in this next report coming out that there's going to be an increase in that, but it's still obviously not truly representative of what we look like as a society. And the reason that representation matters and the reason that calling out who's invisible matters is because when you're a child and you see, the astronaut on TV and that astronaut looks like you, then all of a sudden that opens up, oh, I can do that. So and there's a million different things that's like the beauty of entertainment, right? We get to showcase culture to people and showcase different possibilities. And it's really just making sure that those opportunities are more equitable. Um, and so with that said, of the films that were studied, which there was 15 films had no Black African American speaking characters, 44 had no Latino, and 36 had no Asian speakers. And so obviously, again, we're seeing people are being minimized or invisible on screen. LGBTQ characters are left behind in film. What's really interesting to me is, again, intersectionality. Because if you are going to be, portrayed as gay on screen, you're probably going to be a white male. So having female identifying LGBTQ characters or female and underrepresented group, like very, very small margins. And then it's even worse when you look at disability. Only 2.3% of all speaking characters were depicted with a disability, which is why films like A Quiet Place, even the most recent season of You, where one of the main featured actors was blind. These are things that are just really groundbreaking still because you can only go up from 2.3%. And then obviously, if someone is going to be portrayed with a disability, it's usually physical, they're usually white, because again, this concept of intersectionality is still missing.
And I
And the
would like, and
reason, oh yeah.
I was just going to add is Something that I didn't realize, we were on a panel with some individuals that were hard of hearing, and we were talking about the movie Coda. And while again, we're talking about like we're making leaps and bounds, people are active, they're being, no malicious intent, trying to curate the content. But what I found interesting is what it was, the movie was not made for them. It was made for people who could hear. So when we are creating content, being mindful of, if we're representing that person on screen, if it's a story that comes from that perspective, how do we also make sure that we are connecting to that audience as well? And so it's not just representation on both sides. It's not just about um, creating characters on screen as if it's a check mark. It's about, how does that impact the narrative? How does that impact your audience? And making sure you're engaging and being mindful on all levels. So I think it's really interesting. And every time I'm on panels and I hear what people are saying, it's always eye-opening to me because it's a perspective I haven't even have thought of. So I think the more that we can talk to each other and figure out how to create those access points with the content and what that looks like, um, the more inclusive we're going to be, and the better representation we'll end up getting, and people will want to work in our industry as well. So it's all a cohesive strategy in representation.
Absolutely. And again, representation matters specifically in an art context and behind the screen because when you have diversity in all these different types of roles, then people are going to bring in their culture and their perspective. And hey, that's not really accurate. Can we do it this way? And so, like, as an artist, being able to, like, okay, they just asked me to draw some background characters. Why don't I put like a cochlear implant in one? Why don't I maybe show some transition scars? Why don't I maybe like, why does this have, like, maybe this role should be imagined in a different race? Like when you're able to really influence things just, by thinking a little differently, thinking outside the box, whether it's hiring practice or in your art. um, there's obviously massive gender disparity when it comes to directors, writers, producers, composers. Just fascinating to me that out of, the 1,518 content creators in the study, there were exactly 6 female composers, 57 female directors, and it's just really not getting significantly better at this point in time. But obviously, that's why research is so important, so we can ground ourselves in where we've been and then really chart a path forward. Um, and then again, storytellers are primarily white and male, but casting directors are primarily female, which is interesting. Obviously, white women. Allison, can you talk to us a little bit about the gatekeepers of the industry?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I came up through recruiting, and I also find another kind of tidbit of that I want to share is that by the age of 6, it's really kind of predetermined what you feel like you can achieve. By the age of 6, so then add that to being a marginalized community on top of, what gender you were born, like, or how you identify, and it just like amplifies what you feel you can do within the industry. And so, like, even on my own journey where I wanted to be an artist in the animation industry, in high school, I was told by a teacher basically, like, not to pursue. And what does that look like? And, as people are, and teachers and educators and parents, it all makes a difference of how you determine if you feel like you can pursue something. And in somebody's words, especially an authoritative, educator or parental unit, if they say, this is not viable for you, you're going to probably listen. And so, and and so you look at, so I fell into recruiting. Yeah, it's very female dominated, I would say, on the recruiting front, but there is a lack of diversity in these positions that hire all these different roles. So There's not a lot of diversity in recruiting. There's not a ton of diversity in casting, producerial work. So we talk about needing to meet people where they're at, not just wait for people to come to us. That we need to, if we're the gatekeepers, then we have to be doing more to allow people to want to come into our industry and make them feel welcome into those conversations. But oftentimes, because we're an industry of privilege, we tend to wait for people to find us. And then when they do interview with us, we want them to amplify a certain disposition. And when they don't fit that disposition, then they're immediately not eligible for that role anymore. I would love for us to get to a point where we're engaging with people and we're meeting them where they're at. Not everybody, not every director is going to be super boisterous and outgoing. There's a lot of different types of leaders out in the world. So identifying different types of leadership traits, different types of traits that can be in our industry. And we know from our, being in the industry that there's also people on the spectrum. And so what does that look like? And when you're having conversations and being mindful that not everybody will have the same sort of communication style. So when we're looking into these gatekeeper roles, not only is it important to start diversifying in these positions, but it's also important to start training the gatekeepers and how best to communicate and identify different styles of communication so they can meet people where they're at, not wait for people to come to them.
And our industry is very much exclusion by familiarity. You tend to hire who you know, and you tend to hire people like you. So that's why having increased representation in casting, in recruiting, in talent management is also equally as important. I
And
also do want to
uh,
point out, oh, sorry, yeah.
I was just going to
Yep.
say, and one of the reasons why I went into talent management was to help bring that representation and also um, help support individuals who might not have the confidence yet to pursue those leadership roles and to give them the support and encouragement that they need in order to get where they need to be. And oftentimes I've found in even the 6 weeks that I've been doing this job, it's about just flipping on a switch. It's that easy. As soon as you start like getting people to realize of what they're capable of, the options are endless. And so like we need to really be rallying around each other and getting into these roles where we can mentor and support so that we have increased representation in key leadership roles, whether it's production design or art direction or directing, all of those roles. It's all about kind of that support, mentorship, and meeting people where they're at.
Absolutely. Um, So Women in Animation is an amazing organization. It's one of our close partners at BRIC. And one of the things that Women in Animation does is they actually fund studies in the industry with USC Annenberg. And this is one of the first studies that they did. It came out in June of 2019, and it really takes a deep look at what's going on in inclusion in animation. And generally across the board, you do see that animation is kinder to women in terms of giving them a little bit more of those leadership roles, especially as you can see across producing. Um, but obviously, there's still a long way for us to go. And what I do love about Dr. Smith's reports, clearly a big fan of Dr. Stacey Smith, if you can't tell. If you ever get a chance to see her speak or look at her TED Talk, she's great. Is she has started to put a lot more action plans into these, which at BRIC we're very focused on action and making things happen. So it's great when a leader in the field and a scientist kind of helps us chart a path that we can then promote to everyone. Um, so talking about that again, here we're going to hear a lot about pipeline. There's a pipeline problem, and so you have 18% of women being story artists or 16% being animators, but then you're not seeing that jump from like senior animator to head of animation. Like it's really in those higher tiers where women do get stuck. And there's lots of contributing things to that role that we'll get in deeper in. But it's really, this is where you're seeing that barrier. It's women not jumping up the chat. And again, this is a different study. Link is in the bottom chat. And so we're going to go through and you see, there's the percentages are, pretty dismal when it comes to the different head of. You do see like more females in head of lighting, which I find really interesting. Um, there's almost no women writing for animated films, which is fascinating because I do think you see a lot more female lead characters. So that's again men writing for women, which is fine because obviously a writer can write anyone's story, but just something to be aware of that even though there's necessarily more female characters on screen in animation, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's gender parity throughout. Um, and this is really interesting to me as well. You're looking at this is just school, um, like the short film submissions, in like and a lot of people get their start in the industry through shorts. And so you're seeing that in 2018, even 60% of those were women. So we're having a lot of like in art schools across the board where there's either gender parity or more female students in animation. You're seeing entry level almost overwhelmingly women, if not 50-50. And it's really just when you start seeing up like women are not getting promoted at the rate that men are. And then this is a study that just came out last week. It's Who's Invisible in Visual Effects. And visual effects is pretty significant in terms of women are less likely to appear in title credits. They're less likely to get credited in general, in part because obviously the VFX have like the massive credit block at the end. And only 21.6% of VFX credits go to women. So it's 3.6 to 1 versus animation's 2.2 to 1. Um, Again, I think it's really interesting to me that VFX producers and VFX editors make up most of the leadership from a gender perspective. And I think, as we've pointed out before, producer is a role that is kind of seen acceptable for women. I have a huge tangent on editors, but I'm not going to go there. And again, women of color are nearly invisible in leadership because, again, we do have that problem with intersectionality. Okay, she's a woman, but not other things. So that's something that we're going to have to continue to tackle as an industry. I love, again, these pipeline roles that she's doing because, again, you're able to physically see the data of you have women in these junior roles, you have them getting promoted, and then all of a sudden you just see this like supervisor like block where you go from 15.3% to 2%, 17.4% to 3%, and then up and up, right? It just gets smaller as you get going. I find it fascinating to me to see more women end up in compositing and layout. I would love to see more. I'm sure if I dug deeper into the report, I would find why, but I just think that that's really fascinating where there are a higher concentration of women and what are those outliers, right? Because these are all very technical roles in addition to being artistic. And then the same thing you see on production. And again, love Stacy Smith because she's given us, she's also surveyed what do these VFX women say? Like, what do they think is the problem? And it really breaks down into 3 different areas. And this is pretty consistent across an animation as well. Obviously, the numbers change, but workforce composition. There's more male employees. There's no female artists, industry history, educational gender disparitions, workplace culture, work family life balance, because obviously a lot of the entertainment arts aren't necessarily known for, they're not your typical 9 to 5s in a lot of ways. There's going to be overtime, or there's going to be crunch, or we're going to be on location, or whatever that is, right? And so sometimes those are not conducive to what people have in mind as family and work life balance. um, they said that 29% say that men support each other. Some of them say women don't want to do the job for whatever reason. And then leadership perceptions, which is where I'm going to take this next, where there's gender role incongruity. I always say that word wrong. I'm sure I will get upset later when I rewatch this. This is all being recorded, so please, if you're missing or I'm going too fast on the data, you're able to look that up again or rewatch. And lack of role models. That is huge. I was almost 10 years into my career before I worked with another female at my level, and it was another 12 before I got a female boss. I'm sorry, it was 12 before I had a female boss. And there just weren't a lot of women in my path in the companies I worked at, in my role. And so I do think that, like, me personally, I would have benefited from more female role models. And so I think that's also why we're seeing some of that. Um, Women in the workforce. This is not a Stacy Smith. We have ended the Stacy Smith research portion of our presentation. This is something that I have found a lot. There's lots of different anecdotal reasons for this and different studies that have been done. But in terms of what women can be in the workforce, we tend to fall into different personality buckets. You are the babe, you're the bro, you're the bitch, you're the mom. And babe can be seen as, the child, like they need, like, I need help, or it can be seen in a more sexualized way. Um, but those different perceptions of women, some of them are seen more competent than others, some of them are more promotable, right? So if you are playing the mom, you might get stuck at a secretary level, right? Because you're the admin and you're baking cookies and bringing things to everyone. Versus if you're the bitch in the workplace, you were probably going to get promoted, because we're seeing those things as seen as more competent. The Me Too movement has done an amazing amount of work towards making that better. But we're still in this kind of like post Me Too movement. Obviously, Gen Z is a little bit more fluid when it comes to gender. So I think there's a lot of very exciting things on the horizon that are making all of those things better. But the core issue with that is, and this is what Stacey Smith and almost every person doing work in the field references, is this study done by Alice Eagley at Northwestern in 2002. And she did a really in-depth study that shows that leadership traits are closely aligned with masculine traits like assertive, controlling, tough. And leadership traits do not align with things that we see traditionally as female traits: nurturing, kind, and helpful. And what that means is, as a result, being a leader and being female are incongruous. They're not something that we really see together from like the base function of society, which is why, as you can see, someone that's more on the assertive female side of things would be seen more as a leader and get promoted. So women are not only not pushed into leadership roles, but oftentimes they are punished. I've been told many times that I'm too assertive. And so I think it is something that is getting better, but is not there yet. And that's just kind of where we're at currently.
I
So I like
I
to pivot that
I
to, oh, yes, yeah.
I was just going to add, like, there's a lot of we'll talk about a lot of the solutions, but kind of the points I made before is like we need to all do a better job of meeting people where they're at and redefining
Yes.
what it means to be a creative leader. It can't be enough of like these are the attributes and this is what we're going to rally around. I find plenty of people who have the ability to nurture, be kind, and helpful, being amazing leaders as well,
Same.
and can really mentor and rally and can be super strategic. So, really encouraging, like, don't try not to change who you are. And then also, I also want to be mindful that this isn't a male versus female. This is just about creating opportunities, and that we do need male allies to help come and mentor. They've obviously been the creative leaders in our industry. And so, how do we work together as a unit to solve the inequity, not just bring females in for the sake or look at marginalized communities and place. It's not just about placing people in the roles, but working together as a unit for mentorship and opportunity and confidence. That's where we need to get as an industry, not just placing people, because that's one is finding and placing and encouraging, but if the support isn't there, they're not going to succeed.
And
So what do we
also,
do?
as you can see throughout these studies, we are not, the studies are not accounting for individuals that don't identify in a gender binary way. And so that is obviously not, BRIC does not we obviously are very supportive of anybody that would identify in any such way and all the different genders that have come out. But for the sake of those specific institutions' research, that is the way that they went about it. So with that said, let me tell you about BRIC and how we kind of look at where the data shows us the industry is at and how we try to help and how we try to really just kind of improve one portion of the pipeline to try to make the world a little bit of a happier, more inclusive place. So we have our three main programs, the Summit, Education, and Content. Al, can you tell us about the Summit?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that my inspiration for BRIC was a lot to do with conversations I had with hiring managers and how the candidates I was submitting weren't as diverse as they wanted them to be, but I couldn't fix that problem. And as I alone, I should say. And the more I grew in my career, I realized how challenging it was to get into our industry and how privileged it was. And even though I came from lower middle class, I put myself through school, I found my way. There's a lot of families in different communities that don't have that opportunity or luxury to find their way into our industry. The other thing I knew is because I've worked in gaming, tech, film, and TV, everybody was having a very similar conversation around how to create diversity and inclusion within the workforce. So originally, BRIC was founded on the idea of putting people together in a room with our BRIC Summit and brainstorming. So we have thought leaders from all facets of industry, government, education that come together to solve. And so it's not just a passive place where you come in. It's great to feel inspired. It's great to hear people talk, but we want to make sure that everybody is activated, no matter where you're at in your career. You can be an intern all the way up to a president. Everybody has a seat at the table to make solutions to solve the inequity that we face within our industry. And so we have these yearly summits. We've obviously during COVID have pivoted the last two. This last one that we had in 2021 was virtual, and 2022 will be virtual as well. But amazing ideas have come from our summits, not only as we've grown BRIC, but we've seen ideas that have come from the summit and form different programs within the industry. And we hold each other accountable through the summit as well, which is really important. I think it's hard to stay activated. We tend to be very performative. Like we go where things are loud and where the energy is faced at the exact moment in time, instead of constantly working on the strategy, whether things are heightened or not. So we're really looking for the community to rally at all times. When we realize it can be super taxing to stay activated, but that's what we're hoping to continue and to inspire, encourage people to do. Do you want to talk about this part?
Yeah, so this is our summit. You're all invited. February 11th and 12th. So February 11th is Industry Day. February 12th is going to be more of our educational content. We're going to go through different careers in animation, VFX, and gaming for parents, for students. There's always a creative activity. We'll have teacher education as well. But the main topics that we're talking about is like what Allison was just saying, like how do you stay continuously activated? Obviously we're redefining the workforce and best practices for the 22nd century employee in a post-COVID world. Obviously, we're in the middle of a massive labor shortage. What can we be doing to rebuild in a better way? Impact through authenticity, because like as we've been saying throughout, representation matters. And when you don't have representation in a specific department, it can really show. And so just really looking at that through what does success look like, and then changing potentially cancel culture to reform culture. Obviously, there needs to always be a moment of reckoning, but what is that path back? Like we've never really as an industry taken a step back to really look at like what does the education and looking look like, or repairing look like what is that path, if you will. Anything else to
And
add? Oh,
recognizing, yeah, I was just gonna say is when we talk about inclusivity, we have to realize that we all come from a place of trauma and that we have to that's also part of like communication styles and meeting people where they're at and not making assumptions. We are a culture that is fast to react and fast to throw out. And instead of having conversations where people can have a moment of self-realization, we are now alienating and creating another subsector of a community that is just becoming very defensive and not even being educated. So what can we do to work as a community to lay down the pitchforks a little bit and and open up for dialogue and communication so we can come and heal together versus um, completely being separated all the time. And the more that we can understand each other and recognize what that looks like, the more inclusive I think we'll find our environments to be and find empathy and realize that we're all human. So I'm very excited for our 2022 summit and the conversations we're going to have around that.
absolutely. And I lost my tab. And there we go. So one of the things, again, since we're a very action-focused summit, what we are doing at the summit is we are brainstorming in small groups and gathering everybody's solutions, and then we distribute all of those solutions back to them. So some of the solutions that we collated from this past year was early education, starting early, looping in parents, youth apprenticeship, tracking and recruiting, like should we be looking at the sports recruitment method, mentorships and pathways, government involvement, how can we really loop in our industries to these creative economy stimulus bills, and how can we make sure that a certain portion of that is used towards diverse and underprivileged hires, um, and leadership development. And one of the things that I'm the most proud of is, so obviously BRICS really doubled down on education. We did not start BRIC to get into the high school, middle school education space, but year after year, as we're doing our BRIC summit and we're hearing from experts and what people think is really the problem, we realize we need to do more and more and more. And so we've got very involved in schools. We're in 334 schools in California. We pivoted virtual just like everybody else, which made us really be able to expand to schools nationwide. We do a creative academy, which is typically we partner with a studio and we have high schoolers come and work in small groups to do a creative project. Sometimes that's creating a character through visual development. Sometimes it's a writer's room situation. And it's pretty easy for you to start a creative academy in your town or your area, and it's really just trying to connect career exploration and career readiness techniques to high school students. So if you are in the industry and you're wanting to volunteer, you can reach out to a classroom. You could obviously reach out to BRIC, and we can come together and try to really mentor these kids, because it's as a creative and or entertainment professional, it's actually really hard for me to find a way to volunteer with my skill set. It's like, hey, can you do this newsletter? Not like, hey, can you work with kids on a creative project? And so I think creating those opportunities in whatever way is something that I wish more people were empowered to do, because you could really make a difference in your community. Um, it's really just kind of like an improv lifestyle of yes and we're going to find some kids, we're going to find an educational partner, we're going to do a project together, and it's really amazing to see kids like just come online of like, oh, I could do this for a career, oh, I could do this forever, oh, I'm good at this, so it's like it's just giving students more opportunities and exposures to all the different roles that are in with the entertainment industry, and from there on. We also do career readiness camps and internships. There's a 3 week, a 6 week, and I'm really proud of what our students are able to accomplish. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then the AVG apprenticeship. Um, so the AVG apprenticeship is something that came out of the summit last year. We had a working session with, I believe, there were about 20 leaders that showed up across animation, VFX, and gaming. And we had the union leaders show up. We had our educational partner. We work very closely with our partner, Allison Frenzel, at the Department of Education. And so we are actually very close to submitting our application for being the first federally and state recognized youth apprenticeship program in animation, VFX, and gaming. So this is how we are helping improve the pipeline. If you are a teacher in California, please reach out, especially if you're an AME teacher, because we have 8 schools that are going to be piloting this program. I'm very proud of this program because we brought together about an 80-person advisory that met monthly since March, and we were able to create a new pathway for career technical education in California for animation, VFX, and gaming, and create new education because there's never been this type of communication between industry and public education in this way before. And then once they have graduated and are able to be part of on the job learning, BRIC will be there to obviously help and support them as they're navigating those pathways. So we have about 5 studios signed on to take our apprentices. And we're very excited to kind of roll this out next year. That's what all of our next year will be about. But again, every school that we're working with is a Title I school. Which for those of you that are not in America, Title I means that there's a high percentage of students on the free lunch program. We're specifically trying to serve socioeconomically disadvantaged students and make sure that they're getting, industry standard software training, the different techniques and different departments. And then we're specifically focusing on concept artists, storyboard artists, junior animators, and tech artists is what our apprenticeship will be outputting. So it's been a really amazing project, and we're very thankful for that partnership with the Department of Education.
And
Anything
when
to add
Nicole
on
touched
apprenticeship? Yeah.
upon, when Nicole was talking about the sports recruiting method, the one thing we realized that in bridging the inequity and creating access and pathways, that it wasn't just on the studios, and it can't just be on the studios to create programs. Like, that is one big part of it, absolutely. And I encourage anybody who works in the studio system to really roll up their sleeves and take a look of why there's a disconnect within our worlds. But it's going to take not only studios, but educating the educators, educating the parents about opportunities, and then also the kiddos. And so it needs to be a really amazing holistic approach in order to make change. It can't just be one entity making the change, but we have to move together as a unit to do that. And you look at sports recruiting, you look at how early they start in identifying, say, football players, and they start in middle school and high school, and they track the kiddos from early on, and they talk to the parents, and they talk to the educators, and they hold their hands all the way through college. We The arts industry is a billion-dollar industry, and we do not put anywhere near the amount of effort that the sports industry does in identifying their top players. Now, does everybody who gets recruited by a sports recruiter get in and get to play the majors? Probably not, but at least they get to go to a camp, and they get to have access, and they get to get some of the training. So we're creating and providing the training. We're going to be educating the parents. We're creating a system where the educators aren't alone anymore, and where moments like where I got discouraged by an educator, I don't want that to happen again. So it's so important that we're all, again, moving in a strategic way to make change. And not and also realizing it's not apples to apples. There's parts here in Los Angeles of individuals that don't even have internet access. So how can we rally in these communities to bridge that inequity? Like, we can't even ask them to pursue animation if they don't have the internet access to do the research or have the programs in order to do it. So we can't talk about how much we love or want diversity and inclusion when we're not willing to really fix what is at the core and root of the challenges when it comes to it. And so that is really our goal, is to fix the root of the problem. And hopefully that will then have a domino or butterfly effect to real change into the diversity and inclusion that we want to see in our industry.
We're also partnering with Arts to Work. Arts to Work is the first arts apprenticeship program in the United States. And they're just like we're churning out concept artists and storyboard artists and animators, they're churning out multimedia producers, just like a content creator, and film editors. So if you are a company and you are interested, or at a company and are interested in taking on an apprentice and being a part of the solution, please let us know. We're always looking for placements and ways to, and also if you're a student and you're interested in and being a part of this, obviously please let us know. And as we expand, we would love to bring you in to that as well. All right, and then this was a fun thing we did, and I'm excited for this to be part of our like summer life now, I guess, because everything is very cyclical. But we did a 1 week, a 3 week, and a 6 week internship and camp this past summer, and so it was really great to really see how those different experiences worked. We did them with 4 different school districts, with a total of 18 different schools, and I'm a data nerd, as you might have guessed, since I just showed you all of my favorite data. And so what I really found fascinating was which schools had what types of programs. And so we're bringing in, all different types of leaders in entertainment. We have 6 different studios, 6 different art schools, really trying to hit a 360 holistic approach of this is what the animation development is. You're doing this creative project. um, this is what that job looks like at these different types of studios. This is how you could get that job by going to these very different types of schools. And what was really interesting is the students that had schools with pre-existing AME pathways did amazing. They had that foundational knowledge. They, really took it in and put it out. And the other kids that didn't have that foundational knowledge had amazing ideas and like definitely were able to communicate a great story idea, highly creative, but you could really see where, oh, I really wish your school had a digital art class. Like I wish you had Photoshop. Like because we're dealing with certain school districts that, have one art teacher for an entire school district. So really just looking at how we can help provide foundational support year round. And that's something that we're currently working on with those school districts. But it's been really, I really enjoyed it. Al, do you have anything? I have some stuff of the students after this, but if you had anything to add.
I just, for me, I thought it was so important for them to also see different creators that came into our industry. Some went to school, some different, but the pathway to success isn't um, always, it doesn't always look in one way. And to share that with the kids is so important. And so we had people from all walks of life and different, like Eric Robles, who you sees on, he's self-taught. We have individuals that are who've immigrated here from the US. And so it's really about empowering perspectives. That's really what we champion, is that we don't all come in all shapes, the same shapes and sizes, and we all have very vast experiences. And the more we can share our collective and share our perspectives, the better our industry will be. And so that's why it's so important that whoever we have come in and speak to the students, that there's great representation, not only in how they got to the industry, but where they came from as well.
Absolutely. Al, because one of the main thing that the students were building together is they were building their own animated series pitch. And so they had to come up with their log line. They had to come up with, their characters, their environments. They had to come up with what's their verbal pitch, and obviously what their pitch deck was like. Al, can you take us through what you really saw as a development person out of these kids?
Well, there was a couple things that were really fascinating. One, how like amazingly creative the kids were, like without like you know, the support or understanding of the industry, how fluid their ideas were. That was really inspiring to hear and to witness. But also the fact that we weren't actually, as an industry, creating the content they want to see. They really want slice of life sort of content, and you know, there was a lot of shows they were pitching that revolved around that, and the projects and they would say like there's just nothing I really want to watch that's being greenlit right now from the industry because I really just want to be watching this. So that was really interesting. And then the pitches, like I said, were so solid. Like every one of them like knocked it out of the park. I was super impressed. And then there was one that really resonated with me by Litzy Plata, and she had a story that revolved around her and her mother being from Mexico, Litzy being from here, being first generation, and uh, Litzy's drive to wanting to be a dancer and what that looked like here in America and how she actually connected back to her Mexican roots and followed the dance path that way. And it was a really great story. And now we're actually developing that story. And hopefully we'll get it pitched and bought and all that good stuff. But we're picking it up and developing it further. And you know, giving individuals the opportunity, no matter what age, like again, going back to the power of perspective and stories that want to tell, like encouraging the industry to open up and be open to where those stories come from can really be valuable. And so I'm really excited to see where it goes. And I'm also excited to see and hear where a lot of these students go and what they pursue. We, after a lot of our internships, a lot of them had no idea that there was so many different routes to animation. A lot of them were like, well, you know, I kind of jumped into this internship just wanting to learn a little bit more, but then walked away saying, I want to do this. And that is exactly why we're breaking down the barriers. We're showing them the career pathways and showing them where they will fit and then giving them the support structure they need in order to pursue. And so they go from these programs, we support them if they need help with their college applications, getting them connected to the right individuals for college, and then following them once they graduate. So just being a resource for these humans as they pursue whatever career pathway they're interested into our community.
Absolutely. And with also Wacom was an amazing sponsor of our program, and a lot of these kids, these were all drawn on Wacom tablets, and just a lot of the time, most of them, it was actually their first time using a tablet, so it was really cool to see them go from like, how do I launch Photoshop to that, to really elevating their art in that way. So it was a very great, and obviously Wacom is industry standard technology, so it was a really great experience for them. The last thing that we do um, is content. Al, can you take us through this?
So, looking into other industries, they do an amazing job. So, I'm talking specifically, I want to zero in on the medical community and the medical field. When I was doing some research, just seeing which industries do a really good job of recruiting, it goes back to the medical community. They have amazing trade school programs. And not only that, they create videos around the positions. They showcase who is working in these fields. And not only do they showcase them and how they got into that position in a 5 minute or under video, but they talk about how much that person makes and where they went to college and what are those qualifications. And they do it in multiple languages. So we had the idea of a series. It's called I Get Paid for This, and doing kind of the same thing, but highlighting folks within our industry, whether they're on the creative leadership front or they're in support roles like recruitment or operations or finance, but showcasing that there's humans, the real humans that work in these jobs in this industry that when you're on the outside feels super unattainable. But you hear these individuals, you hear about their journey, you hear about where they went to school, you see how much money they're making now, and it feels you're breaking down a wall, you're breaking down a barrier, and you're showcasing that there's opportunity for them to pursue. And that's what the goal of this particular program is for this of I Get Paid for This. So if you're interested in participating, please reach out to us. We have a really easy format. You just have to kind of Zoom record yourself or, QuickTime record yourself, however you want to do. And then we edit it all together and we post it. And we've gotten really great response from it as well. So would love your participation. We're always looking for volunteers that will share their journey into our industry.
Absolutely. And yeah, I realized the only slide left is our thank you slide. So that's my email, it's our website. If you have any questions or want to get involved in any way, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, and I
And
guess,
I
yeah.
I would just say, like, as you're listening to this, it feels very overwhelming. There's so much work to be done, but there will always be work to be done. So if you can find one thing that you're passionate about that you want to make change, do the one little. Like we started off with a summit, and in those 4 years, we've grown to this entity that we neither of us saw like necessarily coming, but the impact is so great, and people will feel inspired if there's something that you're passionate about. So don't wait for tomorrow to make change. Like, if be part of the solution. There's a lot of social justice warriors on Twitter and Facebook that very much share their opinions, whether they're welcome or not, and that's totally fine. But I really encourage you to go beyond social media, beyond that space, and start engaging in these communities and working to improve our employment pathways, and would love for you to join us in the cause. So thank you so much for having us and hearing us today. Thank you to Connected Inc. 2021 for having us. Nicole, any parting words?
Yeah, I mean, I guess 'cause I know our audience is incredibly and all over the world. But I guess as we are all opening up and the life is getting back to normal, and we're all learning how to interact with each other in real life, just really be assessing like, one thing I'm very concerned with is, like, who am I mentoring? Who is mentoring me? And just, like, really going out of your way to make sure that you're always pulling up someone behind you and helping share your knowledge, even if you don't think that you're knowledgeable about something. I promise you, you are. So just really making sure that you're using your creative powers for good and helping those that might just need a little bit of perspective or advice or someone to bounce ideas off of.
So thank you so much. Any thanks you want to give?
uh, I know, I wish we could see the chat, but that's okay.
All right.